He arrived on the French mainland as a thin, bullied 9-year-old who barely spoke the language. Born in Corsica just as the island was falling to French control, he spent his youth as a lonely outsider, eventually deciding that the only way to survive was to master and then conquer his conquerors. By the late 1700s, France was a nation in total freefall. The monarchy had been executed, the reign of terror was consuming its own revolutionaries, and foreign powers were marching toward the borders to exploit the carnage. The Directory, the government tasked with holding the country together, was drowning in corruption and gridlock. The French people were no longer looking for a royal lineage to save them. They were looking for a winner who could provide stability through force. In a state of total societal collapse, the old hierarchies of birth and status vanish. A vacuum is created, and it belongs to whoever possesses the most effective strategy for the chaos. Napoleon's breakout moment came at the Siege of Toulon in 1793. While his superiors relied on outdated political maneuvers, the 24-year-old artillery officer treated the battlefield like a physics problem, using superior geometry and tactical positioning to drive the British fleet out of the harbor. 2 years later, when a royalist mob threatened to storm the seat of government in Paris, he didn't hesitate. He cleared the streets by firing artillery grapeshot directly into the crowd at point-blank range. He demonstrated that in moments of extreme fragility, the willingness to apply mathematical violence with total decisiveness secures absolute control. He recognized that the traditional way of making war was too slow for a revolutionary age. To dominate a continent, he had to restructure the entire machinery of the army to move with a speed his enemies couldn't even calculate. He fractured his forces into the corps d'armée. Instead of one massive, slow-moving bloc, the army became a network of highly mobile, self-sufficient mini-armies. Each of these corps contained its own infantry, cavalry, and artillery. This allowed them to engage an enemy force independently, holding their ground while the rest of the army closed the distance. This system allowed his units to march separately, living off the land and moving light. They would travel along different roads, only converging at the last possible second to outmaneuver and trap much larger traditional forces. Structural innovation acted as a force multiplier. By designing for speed, he made raw enemy numbers irrelevant. He also understood that public opinion was a weapon as potent as any artillery battery. Long before modern mass media, he began treating every battlefield as a stage for his own legend. During his campaigns in Italy and Egypt, he used battlefield dispatches to manufacture a specific reality for the people back in Paris. He wildly exaggerated his successes and carefully sanitized his strategic blunders, ensuring the public only ever saw him as the invincible savior of the Republic. Within the army, he built a cult of personality by obsessing over morale. He spoke to his soldiers with the same intense, romantic passion he used in the letters he sent to his wife, Josephine, convincing every man in the ranks that they were part of a grand destiny. Actual events on the ground were secondary. In the quest for long-term power, the perception of victory is what creates the reality of it. In 1799, he utilized this combination of military positioning and public mythology to overthrow the very government he once protected. The coup of 18 Brumaire replaced a failing democracy with a military dictatorship, placing Napoleon at the head of the French state. By 1804, he had himself crowned emperor. In a physical rejection of the old world, he took the crown from the hands of the Pope and placed it on his own head. It was a clear signal that his authority was earned through his own merit, not granted by divine right. He then codified this meritocracy into law. The Napoleonic Code centralized the government, standardized the legal system, and established a national bank, replacing 1,000 years of feudal customs with a single, streamlined administrative machine. He had successfully moved beyond winning tactical battles to designing the legal and financial infrastructure of a new continent. But even the most brilliant strategy has a breaking point. In 1812, tactical logic was abandoned in favor of a blind, unchecked ego as he launched an invasion of Russia. He ignored his own principles of mobility. Moving 500,000 men deep into Russia stretched his supply lines until they snapped. The Russian army refused to fight, retreating and burning their own cities to ensure the French would find no food or shelter. When the winter arrived, the Grand Army was decimated. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers died from the cold and starvation, effectively ending his military dominance in a single season. The myth of his invincibility was gone. Allied forces captured Paris in 1814, forcing his abdication and sending him into a humiliating exile on the island of Elba. Even the most effective strategic machine becomes a death trap when the person running it begins to believe they are immune to the rules of logic. He escaped Elba for one last desperate attempt at power. During the 100 Days, he used his legendary status to win back the French army without firing a shot, as soldiers sent to arrest him instead joined his side in a final surge of loyalty. But his final defeat at Waterloo was inevitable. The united armies of Europe had spent a decade studying his tactics. They were now using his own corps system and mobile maneuvers against him. He was sent into a final inescapable exile on St. Helena, a remote rock thousands of miles out in the South Atlantic. There, he spent his last years dictating his memoirs, continuing to fight a war for his historical legacy, long after his physical power had vanished. His empire was dismantled, but the systems he built were too efficient to discard. The military doctrines, the centralized banks, and the legal codes he established survived the fall of his dynasty. Napoleon's career illustrates a brutal reality. While an empire can vanish in a single winter, the administrative machinery he built still dictates how modern states operate today.